The rain fell incessantly outside, and the sound of the drops hitting the roof of the small house seemed to be an echo of my inner worries. I sat at the table surrounded by unpaid bills, each one a cruel reminder of the reality I tried to ignore. Emma, my little one, was sitting on the floor, playing with a stuffed bear she had gotten from me for her first birthday. I watched her, her face illuminated by the soft light that came through the window, and my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "Hi, my love," I murmured, trying to put on a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She looked at me with those big blue eyes that reflected the innocence of childhood. "You're so special, you know that?" She smiled back, and it was as if a ray of sunlight had passed through my chest, warming what was frozen by doubt and fear. But the truth was that the pressure was building. How could I support my daughter? The part-time job barely covered my expenses for the month, and I felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of frustration and despair. The bills on the table seemed to multiply, and every time I looked at them, the anguish only increased. What could I offer Emma? A home in the midst of poverty? A life full of deprivation? What would be best for her? That rainy night, the idea of leaving her in an orphanage began to form in my mind, like a shadow that became clearer and more seductive every moment. But I knew it was a difficult decision, one of the most painful a mother could make. As the rain continued to fall outside, I found myself thinking about the last time I had seen a genuine smile on his face. The image of her playing carefree made me feel a lump in my throat. What would she do without me? "Emma," I said, trying to hide the pain in my voice, "Mommy needs to talk to you." She stopped and looked at me curiously. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live in a different place? A place where other children play and have lots of toys?" She frowned, confused. "But I like it here, Mom. You're my best friend." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I know, my love, but sometimes moms have to make difficult decisions so their daughters can be happy." That night, as the storm raged outside, I braced myself for what was to come. With a heavy heart, I wrote a letter trying to explain everything. "Emma, if you ever read this, know that I love you more than anything in this world. This is an act of love, even if it seems otherwise." The words were like poison, and each letter I wrote seemed to cut deeper. With the letter in hand, I picked Emma up. The smell of her hair, the heat of her body pressed against mine, it all reminded me of how much I loved her. And yet, it was necessary. It was the only way I saw for her to have a better life. When I arrived at the orphanage, my heart was racing. The rain was falling in torrents, as if the sky was also mourning my loss. I looked into Emma's eyes, and there, I saw the trust and love she had for me. "You're going to be a star, my little one. I promise you will have a life full of light." As soon as I left Emma in the headmistress' arms, a silent scream echoed inside me. I said goodbye with tears streaming down my face, and as I left, a feeling of relief and pain consumed me. As I walked away, I swore I would do everything I could to make sure she had the life I couldn't provide. And so, I left my daughter behind, believing I was doing what was best for her, even if it meant living without her. Waking up in the orphanage was a strange experience, surrounded by a mix of familiarity and loneliness. Sunbeams filtered through the faded curtains, creating patterns of light on the wooden floor. I always woke up to the sound of other children's laughter and conversations, but there was something in my heart that reminded me that that joy was only temporary. I was Emma, and even though I was surrounded by friends, there was a void that could only be filled by my mother's presence. In the halls of the orphanage, the walls seemed to whisper stories of children who had found homes. As I waited for my turn, I used to sit by the window watching the world outside, imagining what it would be like to have a home, a family. In my thoughts, I saw myself running in a field, holding my mother's hand, laughing and playing. But the reality was different. I was trapped between four walls, dreaming. "Emma, come here, look what I did." The cheerful voice of a friend, Clara, brought me back to reality. She was holding a colorful drawing with vibrant and happy features. "I painted our orphanage. Look how handsome he is." Clara had a special way of seeing life, as if happiness were always within her reach. "It's beautiful, Clara." I smiled, forcing an enthusiasm that didn't fully reflect how I felt. "You should show it to the director. Who knows, maybe she'll let us do an exhibition." "Good idea," she replied, her eyes shining. But inside I knew this was just a dream. Exhibitions were for children who had already been adopted or had a certain future. I felt like a shadow, invisible and forgotten. Time passed, and as always, rumors about new families reached us. It was like a wave of hope crashing against the rocks of reality. One day, the director entered the room with a wide smile. "We have a new family interested in adopting children," she announced, and immediately, the children began to stir, their eyes full of expectation. "They want to meet you." I looked at the faces around me, the eager smiles, but my heart sank. I wasn't a priority. I knew that most children, with their vibrant personalities and charming stories, had a better chance of being chosen. When the family arrived, I watched everything from a distance, my chest tight. They approached a group of girls, choosing them lovingly. One by one, they shed their insecurities, embracing their new parents with radiant smiles. But I remained there, a silent spectator of yet another moment that didn't belong to me. "Emma, come," Clara called, pulling me close. "Let's talk to them." I hesitated, but her joy was contagious. Following her, my heart skipped a beat. But when the family walked away, taking Clara with them, a silent scream echoed inside me. I was alone again. Weeks passed and I sank into my thoughts. In search of a way to deal with pain and loneliness, I found an ally in art. The orphanage's activity room became my refuge. Paints and brushes were my companions, and I lost myself in each brushstroke. The colors I chose were a reflection of what I felt. Deep blues of sadness, bright yellows of hope. "Hey Emma, what are you painting?" The director entered the room and her eyes lit up when she saw my screen. It's a dream," I replied shyly. "A house with a garden and a mother who loves me. It's beautiful." She smiled, but her gaze carried a sadness that I couldn't understand. At that moment, I realized that art was not just a way to express my pain, but also a path to healing. I wanted my mother to see this, to know that even far away, I carried her in every trace. The nights were the hardest. While the other children slept, I lost myself in thoughts of what could have been. The silence in the orphanage was piercing, and in the midst of the darkness, the longing for my mother became almost palpable. The desire to find her one day drove me, and I knew I couldn't give up. "One day I'll find out where you are, Mom," I whispered to myself, determination building inside me. "One day I will find you." I had just graduated in arts, and as I looked at my diploma, a mix of pride and anxiety invaded me. What I really wanted was not just to create beautiful paintings, but to find the answers I had been searching for years. My mother's absence consumed me, and after 2 decades of unanswered questions, I decided it was time to confront the past. The idea of looking for Sarah, the woman who abandoned me, terrified me and at the same time filled me with hope. I remembered all the nights I dreamed about her, imagining her face, her voice, the warmth of her embrace. The orphanage has always been a place of love and pain, and even surrounded by friends, the emptiness of maternal absence never erased. With the courage I had developed over the years, I picked up my cell phone and looked for information about Sarah. With each click, the expectation grew, as did the fear of what I might find. Finally, I found a clue. A small store in a nearby town where Sarah worked as a clerk. My heart raced. With a mix of fear and determination, I decided that I would go there. The trip was full of thoughts and memories. Each kilometer covered brought me closer to the woman I so longed to meet, but also feared. What would I say? How would you confront her? The questions multiplied in my mind. When I reached the store, a small wooden building with a worn sign, I took a deep breath. The smell of fresh coffee and old paper filled my nostrils and, for a moment, I felt transported to another place. The store was empty except for Sarah. She was behind the counter, her hair tied up in a messy bun, staring at a computer screen. Time had left marks on his face, but there was a familiarity that made me hesitate. "You can do it, Emma," I whispered to myself. I needed to go in and talk to her. With my heart in my throat, I pushed the door open and the bell jingled, making Sarah look up. Our eyes met, and a chill ran down my spine. I could see the surprise on his face, followed by deep confusion. "Emma!" Her voice was a whisper, almost as if she was trying to believe I was really there. "Hi, Mom," I replied, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. She stood up slowly, as if in a dream, and took a step forward. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know anything about you." Her expression was a mix of relief and pain, and I realized she was carrying the same weight as me. I came because I needed to understand. What happened to me, why you left me? I said, the words coming out with an intensity one hadn't planned. Sarah took a step back as if I had hit her. Emma, I can't explain everything right now. It was an impossible choice. I was so lost. Lost? You left me in an orphanage, Mom. Don't you realize how much that hurt me? Anger and sadness mixed in my chest, and I was about to burst into tears. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself for the approaching storm. I know it was selfish. I just wanted you to have a better life, away from the pain I was experiencing. But I wanted you, Mom. I wanted to know you were there, even if it was in pain. My voice cracked and tears began to slide down my face. Sarah approached me slowly, as if she wanted to hug me, but hesitated. Emma, please listen to me. I always think about you. Every day. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken emotions. What I wanted most was to understand, but the pain was still very present, and I didn't know if I would be able to hear his justifications. I looked into her eyes, hoping to find some answer, but instead I found a woman as fragile as I was. I'm not here to blame you, Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. But I need to understand why you did that. What happened that led you to that decision? The words hovered between us, heavy and loaded with history. It was the beginning of a confrontation that I hoped would lead us to a place of healing. But the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. My heart beat wildly as I approached the door that I had pictured in my imagination for so long. The house had a familiar yet strange feel, as if I were about to enter a world that was no longer mine. My hands shook as I raised my hand to knock. What would I say? How would my mother react when she saw me? A mixture of anxiety and expectation consumed me, and every beat of my heart seemed to echo in my ears. When I finally knocked on the door, the sound reverberated like thunder in my mind. I waited, my breath caught in my throat. Time seemed stretched out, each second an eternity, and then the door opened. Sarah was in front of me, her eyes widening in immediate recognition. Silence stretched between us, an abyss of unspoken emotions. She looked older, her face lined with worry and regret, but there was something undeniable. I was looking at the woman who gave me life. Emma. Her voice was a whisper, as if saying my name would break the fragility of the moment. Mom. My voice came out almost as a whisper too, carrying the weight of 2 decades of pain and longing. What should have been a joyful encounter was, in fact, a minefield of conflicting feelings. She hesitated, the door ajar, as if she wanted to invite me in but at the same time didn't know if it was the right thing to do. You are here. After all these years. The sadness in his eyes was palpable. Yes, I am. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage. I came to find you, Mother. We need to talk. The words came out like an arrow hitting their target, but not without pain. She nodded, opening the door a little more, inviting me in. The interior of the house was simple, but the smell of fresh coffee and flowers in a vase on the table gave me a feeling of home, even though I had never lived there. How are you? Sarah asked, hesitation still present in her voice. It was such a simple question, but the layers of pain behind it made everything more complicated. I am fine. I graduated in arts. I spent many years in an orphanage, Mom. The outburst took its toll on me, the memories of loneliness and despair coming back to the surface. I just wanted to understand why you left me. She brought her hands to her face, as if trying to hide the pain I had caused. Emma, I didn't know how to take care of you. I was so lost. There was no money, there was no support. I thought you would have a better life. Better than living with your absence. Anger and sadness mixed in my voice. I grew up without you. I always dreamed of having a mother, and you weren't there. I just wanted to know you cared. Tears started to slide down her face. I cared, Emma. I cared so much that the only solution I could see was to leave you in a place where I believed you would be safe. I didn't want to give you a life of hardship. But you gave me no choice. I screamed, feeling the pain turn into a desperate scream. You abandoned me, and it made me feel like I was unlovable. That it wasn't enough. The silence between us became heavy, as if the walls were listening to our tumultuous conversation. I knew there was much more we needed to discuss, But in that moment, the truth was clear. We had both suffered. Emma, I'm sorry. I can't change the past, but I want to understand you now. I want to know who you have become. The vulnerability in her voice touched me in a way I didn't expect. I want you to understand, Mom. I'm not just here to accuse you. I just want answers. Why did you make such a painful decision? The pain in my chest mixed with a deep desire for connection. Because I was scared. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but now I see that I only caused more pain. Her sincerity made me hesitate. It was difficult to accept that, behind the decision that hurt me so much, there was a scared woman trying to fight her own battles. I want to know more about you, about what happened, but I don't know if I can forgive. My voice cracked and I felt vulnerable. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on me, as if she were trying to truly see me for the first time. I'm willing to explain everything, Emma. I want you to know that, despite everything, I never stopped loving you. And in that moment I realized that the answers I was looking for wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, there was a path to reconciliation. I was paralyzed, standing in the dark, unassuming living room of my mother's house, as the weight of 2 decades of pain and abandonment hung between us. Sarah, teary-eyed, tried to find the right words, but I didn't want to hear it. The house, with its peeling walls and worn furniture, seemed to reflect the lives we had both led. She broke the silence first, her voice shaking. Emma, I didn't know what to do. I was so lost. Lost, I replied, disbelief dripping through my words. You left me. How can you call this being lost? Haven't you thought about me, how I would be without you? I thought about you every day. Every minute I spent away from you was torment, she said, her voice breaking, but I wasn't willing to give in. The pain I carried was very deep, very recent. If you really thought about me, you would have fought to stay. You didn't do that. You abandoned me. Anger boiled inside me, and I felt my heart beating with an intensity that almost made me want to scream. She took a deep breath, as if trying to compose herself. Emma, the truth is that I couldn't take care of you. The situation I was in was unsustainable. My past, my mother. She struggled with mental illness, and I didn't want you to go through that too. Her words resonated like a distant echo in my mind. Are you telling me your mother wasn't just your mother? That her madness affected you so much that you chose to leave me in an orphanage, rather than give me a chance to have a life with you? This isn't how I wanted things to be. Sarah exclaimed, her eyes shining with tears. I love you, Emma. I always loved it. Love is not enough, I said, my voice now softer but still cutting. You knew I would be alone. That I would spend my days waiting for a mother who would never come. I didn't know. I didn't know you would feel that way. I just wanted you to be happy, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Guilt and pain intertwined in her gaze, and for an instant, I saw the woman who had lost herself in her own choices. Do you think leaving me was the best choice? That it made me happy? I asked, my heart heavy. I spent so many years wondering why you didn't want me. Because I wasn't enough. Emma, you are enough. You always were. I had no choice, I was at such a low point. I thought I was doing what was best for you, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I wanted you to have a life I couldn't give you. And you think leaving me was the solution? You weren't worried about giving me a better life, you were only worried about yourself, I said, the venom of my words pouring into every syllable. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to block out the pain I was inflicting. I know I can't change what I did, but I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. I kept all your photos, all the letters you never received. That hit me like a punch in the stomach. Did you keep photos? Cards? And that's supposed to make me feel better. Disdain escaped my mouth. You should have been there. That's all I wanted. A chance to have a mother. Silence settled between us, thick and heavy, as we tried to process what had been said. I realized that the anger I carried was a way of protecting myself from the pain that was still very real. Sarah and I were prisoners of our past, but there was a thin thread of hope that was beginning to form between us. Emma, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try. I want to understand you and you understand me, Sarah spoke, her voice now firmer. I took a deep breath, feeling a rush of conflicting emotions. Maybe this is a start, I murmured, still hesitant. but feeling like dialogue could take us to a place where the pain became a little more bearable. The silence in the room was palpable, filled with emotions that had yet to be spoken. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the words I had rehearsed in my mind seemed to dissipate when I finally faced my mother. Her expression was a mix of pain and regret, but this wasn't the time to let that get carried away. I needed answers, and I was willing to fight for them. "You can't just show up in my life and expect everything to be okay, Sarah," I said, frustration brimming in my voice. "Years passed, and I just wanted to understand what happened. What made you leave me?" Sarah looked away, as if the weight of her memories were unbearable. "Emma, I thought I was doing what was best for you. I couldn't take care of you. Orphanage was an option. I thought you would have a better life." "Better? Do you think this is a better life? Growing up without a mother? Without knowing what it's like to be loved?" Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the anger and pain I had bottled up for so long. "I didn't want to be a statistic, Sarah. I wanted my mother." "I was a scared girl," she replied, her voice shaking. "I did not know what to do. When you were born, the pressure was unbearable. I just wanted you to have a chance." "A chance? And what did I do with this chance? I spent my childhood dreaming about you, your voice, your smell. The only thing I had were the letters that were never delivered. I needed more, something that made me understand his choice." But before I could continue, the doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Sarah stood up, looking relieved for a breather, and walked to the door. When she opened it, a woman with gray hair and a firm expression stood there, holding a folder of documents. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, looking at us with a look that mixed concern and determination. "I'm the director of the orphanage where Emma grew up. We need to talk, Sarah." I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The director entered, and the tension in the room increased. "Sarah, I didn't know you'd met Emma," she began, but soon realized the mood wasn't the best. "But we need to be direct. The situation is critical." "Criticism? What are you talking about?" Sarah questioned, her expression of concern intensifying. "I received alarming news about your financial situation. You're about to lose your house, and I don't know how you're going to support yourself," the director replied, her voice firm. "Emma could be the key to solving this. She's a talented artist, and together you could open an art gallery. This could change everything." A wave of disbelief hit me. "An art gallery? Are you serious?" I had never thought about using my passion for something so great. "Do you really think this could work?" "Yes, Emma. You have a talent that should not be wasted. And Sarah, you need help. You don't have to face this alone," the director insisted, looking at us with hope. Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and expectation. I don't know if I can do it. The past haunts me. What if I fail again?" "We don't know until we try," I said, determination rising within me. "We can do this together, Sarah. We cannot let fear stop us from fighting for a better future." The silence that followed was filled with possibilities. Sarah finally nodded, the decision taking shape in her eyes. "You're right, Emma. We need to unite. We can heal our wounds and build something new. A future that is not marked by abandonment, but rather by resilience and love." And in that moment, between the shadows of the past and the light of a new beginning, I felt that we were finally taking the first step towards rebuilding what had been lost. It was time to rewrite our story, no longer as separate mother and daughter, but as partners, ready to face the world together.